Think of the name Porsche and invariably you'll think of sports cars, the Boxster, the Taycan and others, but ultimately the 911, the car that put the modern day Porsche name on the map. But a man who founded the brand in 1931, Ferdinand Porsche, already had a long and varied history of vehicle design that goes back to the beginning of the car industry, with designs that included one of the first electric cars, the first hybrid petrol electric car, and later the Volkswagen Beetle, and in World War II the largest tanks ever built. He also had a rather dubious history with the German Nazi Party and Hitler himself, being known as Hitler's favourite auto engineer. And like Werner von Braun, the rocket engineer, Porsche also came out of the war more or less unscathed, other than a short prison sentence. This is the amazing story of the only man to be voted the car engineer of the century, Ferdinand Porsche, and the vehicles he created before the 911. This video is sponsored by Omaze, and we're excited to be working with them to offer you the chance to win an unplugged Tesla S Apex Plaid and support a great cause, the Juju Foundation. All you need to do is to go to omaze.com/CuriousDroid to enter your chance to win. Omaze gives people the chance to dream big and win once-in-a-lifetime prizes, all while helping non-profit organisations make the world a better place. In 2021, they gave away over $27 million to charity, supporting 131 non-profit organisations and having 6,462 Omaze winners. Now, if you like performance cars, then the Tesla S Apex Plaid by Unplugged Performance will be right up your street. The Tesla S Plaid is already the world's fastest accelerating production car with all-wheel drive, 396-mile range, the equivalent of 1,020 horsepower and 1,050 pound-feet of torque, giving you a 0 to 60 time of just 1.99 seconds. Unplugged Performance takes this and customises it with a 19-piece carbon fibre wide-body kit, ultralight 21-inch wheels, sports dynamic lowering air suspension, upsized carbon ceramic brakes, yoke steering wheel and full self-driving capability. This one is in satin white with cognac von Holzhausen bamboo tan vegan leather interior, a first for a Tesla. Just imagine what you would do if this car turned up on your driveway, and all you need to do to be in with a chance of making that happen is to go to omaze.com/CuriousDroid and click on the Enter Now button. Ferdinand Porsche was born on the 3rd of September 1875 in what was part of Austria-Hungary at the time and today part of the Czech Republic. From an early age he showed a great aptitude for technology, mechanics and in particular electricity. His father was a master panel beater for carriages, and although he was expected to follow in his father's footsteps and he did help out in the family business, he also went to night classes at the Imperial Polytechnic College in Reichenberg and soon got a job on a recommendation with the Bella Egger & Co. electrical company, which later allowed his family house to be one of the first to have an electrical supply. He also built and raced their first electric wheel hub motor. This fascination with electricity and his mechanical aptitude brought him to the attention of Ludwig Lohner, the head of the Austrian Carriage Company, who in 1895 realised that the time of a horse-drawn carriage was coming to an end, and that powered carriages, especially electrically powered ones, were the future. He commissioned the Egger Company to build the first prototype and the young Porsche to design the drivetrain. On the 26th of June 1898, the Porsche P1, as he called it and stamped on its many parts, rolled down the streets of Vienna with Porsche as its test driver. The carriage had a 2.2 kilowatt hub motor with a 12-speed controller, but it could be boosted up to 3.7 kilowatts for short bursts. It offered 6 forward gears, 2 reverse, and 4 braking gears, along with an electrical brake which cut the power. This drove the rear wheels, and with its battery had a curb weight of 1,350 kilos and a range of 79 kilos with a top speed of 35 kilometers per hour, and the battery could last between 3 to 6 hours. In many ways, this is now thought of as the ancestor to the current hybrid Porsche cars, including the 918. In 1899, he and the P1 entered the Berlin road race and finished in first place 18 minutes ahead of the nearest competitor. In a second contest, it won efficiency tests and was recorded as the most efficient vehicle in urban traffic. Other changes over time included four-wheel braking and four-wheel drive, which wowed the crowds at the Paris Exposition Universelle in 1900. The car was last seen in public in 1902 and remained hidden in a garage in Austria for 112 years until it was rediscovered in remarkably good condition and put on permanent show at the Porsche Museum in 2014 as the first ever Porsche vehicle. In 1901, he also designed the first petrol-electric car, the Lohner Porsche Mixed Hybrid. Over 300 of these were built with batteries that were replaced by a Daimler engine which drove the generator to power the electric motors. This had a top speed of 56 km an hour and broke many speed records at the time. Soon other more powerful engines were fitted and enabled them to claim even more records. Porsche's fascination with hybrid petrol drivetrains would remain strong and resurface almost 40 years later during the Second World War. In 1902, he was drafted into the military and for a time was the chauffeur to the Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria, whose assassination in 1914 kicked off the start of the First World War, which would be the precursor to the Second, in which Porsche would play a pivotal role. In 1906, Austro-Daimler recruited him as their chief designer, and he went to work creating the 85 brake horsepower Model 2780 for the Prince Henry trial, a precursor to the German Grand Prix, and by 1916 he was their managing director. During this time, the bulk of Daimler's output was for vehicles for war production, and part of this were Porsche-designed artillery tractors, the biggest of which were the giant armoured tractors called the M17 Goliath, which weighed 10 tons and towed large guns and mortars on the battlefield. After World War I, he continued making racing cars, many of which he drove, winning 43 out of 53 races. But in 1923, Porsche left Austro-Daimler after a difference about the future direction of car development. After being hired as the technical director for Daimler Motor and Gesellschaft and moving to Stuttgart, he continued developing a successful racing car designs. After the merger of Benz and C and Daimler Motor and Gesellschaft into what we now know as Mercedes-Benz, Porsche put forward the idea of a small, cheap car, but the board were not happy and wanted to continue with the luxury end of the market, and in 1929 he left, this time for Steyr Automobile, but due to the Great Depression he ended up being made redundant there as well. In 1931, he, his son Ferry and son-in-law Anton Peach and several others including Karl Raber as chief designer set up Porsche GmbH, offering design and consulting services for engines and vehicles. Now Ferdinand Porsche was free to design his new small car from scratch, as well as high-performance racing cars for the newly formed Auto Union in 1932, which was looking for a showpiece project. As Porsche's fame and his race-winning cars became more widely known, news reached Joseph Stalin, who invited Porsche to the USSR and offered him unlimited funds to develop and start production of a small people's car to transform the Soviet car industry. Although the offer was tempting, he thought the language barrier would be too much of a hindrance, so he turned down the offer. That turned out to be a prescient move, as soon another dictator much closer to home came calling for his services. In 1933, at the Berlin Motor Show, Chancellor Adolf Hitler announced his intention for every German to own a car or tractor, as a way to show that the Nazi Party politics would benefit everyone. At the time, car ownership in Germany was just 1 in 50 people, and he launched 2 competitions, one for a people's car and another for a state-sponsored racing program to develop a high-speed German car industry. Porsche wrote to Hitler and offered his services, and after the two men met in 1934, Porsche won the contract to design the people's car which became the Volkswagen Beetle. Its distinctive rounded shape came from the racing world, where the rounded aerodynamic car shapes were all the rage. It was also required for better aerodynamic efficiency due to the small engine size, although the Czech company Tatra sued Porsche for infringing its design for the air-cooled engine, and later settled out of court. Porsche also helped set up Volkswagen to build the new people's car. They also helped set up the giant factory at Wolfsburg, where the Beetle car would be built. But there was a problem in the fact that Porsche was born a Czech citizen, and Hitler considered the Czechs to be subhuman. So to square the circle of Hitler's favourite auto engineer, Porsche was offered German citizenship to give up his Czech one, and he also became a member of the Nazi Party as well as the SS. By 1938, the German Army Weapons Agency approached Porsche to build a light military vehicle that could carry 4 fully armed soldiers over any terrain and was versatile and dependable. This was designed by Ferdinand Porsche and called the Volkswagen Type 82 Kubelwagen, and was heavily based on the Beetle chassis and engine with a different body. Although 53,000 Kubelwagens were built during the war, its nearest Allied equivalent, the Willys Jeep, numbered nearly 650,000. After the German invasion of Russia, and to the surprise of the Germans, they realised to their cost that the Soviets had a much better tank than they thought in the T-34. This caused problems with the German tanks because none of them could penetrate the frontal sloping armour with their rounds just bouncing off it. The Germans did find a temporary solution in destroying the T-34's tracks, and thus disabling them, but the race was on to make a new tank that could carry a gun that could take out a T-34 at 1,500 metres. Soon, a new contract was given to Porsche for a much bigger, heavier tank, and Hitler's favourite engineer was given the job of making a heavy tank that could accommodate an 88mm gun in a very short space of time. To speed up the process, Porsche revisited designs for a tank he called the Leopard that had been done before the war, but back then it was too heavy for the available engines. As Hitler often did, he gave the contract to 2 companies to see who would do the best job. So tank makers Henschel and Porsche both had to make working prototypes of a 45-ton tank with the code name VK45P for Porsche and H for Henschel, aka the Tiger 1, and by the 20th of April 1942, Hitler's birthday. Henschel chose a conventional diesel powertrain, but Porsche was determined to use the latest technology to make what he thought would be a better tank, so he revisited the petrol-electric hybrid drivetrain idea. This time he would use 2 air-cooled V10 Porsche Type 101 petrol engines at the rear of the tank. Each one would drive a 500 kVA generator, which in turn drove a 230 kilowatt motor, one for each track via a 15-to-1 gearbox. However, Porsche's use of a bunch of new technologies all in the same tank for the first time caused major issues, and the rush nature of the job meant there was little time for testing available. It was also found that the engine's cooling system caused it to lose power and required a major redesign of the engine compartment. The power of the twin V10 engines was 640 horsepower each, but these and the electric drivetrain made the tank 12 tons overweight. The use of what were large electrical generators and motors at the time also required a lot of copper, which was in very short supply in the Third Reich. This meant that it was in direct competition with the electric drives for U-boats and electronic equipment like radios and radar. At the testing ground, things didn't go well. The tank was so heavy it sank into the soft ground, and the Henschel team offered to tow the stuck Porsche tank out of the mud, which Porsche politely declined. Henschel eventually won the contract by being slightly more reliable and easier to build without the huge amount of copper requirement. By now, Porsche had built 90 chassis, but when the contract was lost, a new purpose was sought for them. Hitler wanted the long barrel 88mm Pak 43 fitting into them, but the engineers just couldn't get it to fit into the turret. So they dropped the rotating turret and mounted the gun on the back of the chassis and covered it with a protective shield. They also upped the frontal armour to 200mm. All of this made the already heavy tank super heavy, as it increased to 65 tons, and the name it was given was the Panzerjäger Ferdinand, but it was also known as the Elephant Tank, which was very appropriate. Although the Ferdinands did well on the battlefield during the Battle of Kursk, reporting 320 kills for the loss of just 13 Ferdinands, there just wasn't enough of them to make a difference to the 2,700 Soviet T-34s. Although well armoured, they were often too heavy for the ground in the Kursk area, which had marshes, rivers, and few bridges that could carry their weight. At Kursk, nearly 30% of them broke down, and when they did, towing one Ferdinand required 5 Panzer IVs chained together. Although Porsche created designs for the Tiger II using a similar hybrid drivetrain, Henschel once again won the contract as the military was now wary of his advanced hybrid drivetrain. But that didn't stop Porsche from designing another super heavy tank, and he knew Hitler had an obsession with wonder weapons. So he put together a design for a tank that would dwarf everything else on the battlefield, and was equipped with a 128mm gun that could destroy any Allied tank at ranges exceeding 3,500 metres. The tank itself was massive, at 10.2 metres long by 3.7 metres wide by 3.6 metres high, and weighed 188 tonnes, although the original design was originally for a maximum weight of 100 tonnes, and ironically was codenamed the Mouse. It would use a 44.5 litre inverted V12 Daimler-Benz MB517 supercharged marine diesel engine, producing 1,375 horsepower, driving an electrical generator to drive the 2 electric motors, each of which drove one of the 1.1 metre wide tracks. Because it was so heavy, no bridges could hold it, so it was envisaged that it would ford rivers by submerging itself in up to 8 metres of water, with another Mouse providing the electrical power to drive the tank. Only 2 prototypes ended up being built, and one was captured by the Soviets. After the war, it was sent for testing at Kubinka before being put in a tank museum there. After the war, Porsche, Ferry and Anton Peach were arrested by the French authorities on war crimes charges after a disagreement with the head of Renault, who Porsche were working for as part of war reparations. Although they were all close friends of Hitler and well embedded in the Third Reich, which didn't help matters, the charges were for the use of forced foreign labour in the Volkswagen factory, and in particular French labour. Ferry was freed after 6 months and kept the Porsche business running whilst gathering the 1 million francs, about $68,000 for bail and the release of Ferdinand and Anton, after witnesses testified that there were no French forced workers there. The family then returned to Stuttgart and started work on the 356 sports car, even though they had limited funds and tooling. In the end, Ferry took the prototype around various dealers and asked for an upfront payment for each car. Although he anticipated about 1,500 total orders, over the next 17 years they built over 78,000. Porsche also did extra consulting work on the Beetle and received a royalty from each one built as payment, which turned out to be a very good deal, as over 20 million were eventually made. Ferdinand Porsche also had one final fling with tank design as he headed the conglomerate to build the new West German post-war tank, which became the highly successful main battle tank, the Leopard, which set the standard for European tanks in the post-war era. But Ferdinand didn't live to see its success, as in January 1951 he died shortly after a stroke at the age of 75, leaving Ferry to take over the business and build it into the world-renowned sports car company that it is today. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, then please thumbs up, subscribe and share, and thanks go to all of our patrons for their ongoing support.